Welcome to Co-Opinions. This is Indie Thoughts, the segment where we talk to independent studios to get their thoughts and perspectives on different things. Today we have Dave Mervik from Tarsier Studios on.
Excellent. Hello.
Hello. Thank you very much for joining me this afternoon for you and this very early morning for me.
Yeah, thanks for even wanting to talk to us. It's not that often. People really know who we are.
Well, that's actually why I try to have this kind of segment, because there's these small games by smaller studios that I think really aren't getting the representation or conversation they need. So I really like to reach out to studios like yours so we can learn more about what went into it, both narratively, design-wise, that kind of thing.
Okay, cool.
So if you don't mind, I'm going to go ahead and get right into it. First, I'd like to talk about your game Static, because that is a much more compact conversation to have. So Static, that's a VR game about getting out of puzzle boxes. What has the general reception been to that? Because it's a very obtuse game narratively when you're playing it, and I get the vibe that's the intent.
Well, I don't think we were being purposefully obtuse more than we weren't wanting to hold people's hands, if you know what I mean. It's kind of, I know you can't help but look like you're being coy or annoying by not telling people the answers or making things so obvious because you wanted to experience the story. That has been the trend lately, hasn't it?
Right.
You're so desperate for people to enjoy your content, as people like to call it, and your wonderful story, that you don't want to hold them up with the game. So we wanted to kind of get away with that. Actually, with Little Nightmares as well, it was the same thing. We didn't want to kind of just handhold people. We wanted to enjoy the story, but we also want them to feel like they played a game. So with Static, it was more just a case of the whole cool thing about this is it's in a testing situation, and so you instantly have that kind of suspicion and paranoia and like what are you trying to learn from me type feeling. So of course you don't want to tell them what to do. So it kind of all just sort of fit together, and yeah, like I say, our passions are let players play. Really, and that sounds really kind of cheesy, but I think that's probably the kind of thing that makes us excited.
And the endings in particular, I guess spoilers for people who haven't played through these games. The endings,
that's a lot of people.
The endings in particular I thought were fascinating, because the standard ending is a very bleak ending, a very dark ending, because and it kind of felt like that's your guys' MO at this point. Don't get me wrong, I've enjoyed it for what it is, but the original ending where your character is dangled above a pit and then just dropped into a disposal chute, if you haven't been looking into it, it seems like a very abrupt way to go. But if you unlock the secret ending, where it turns out that it's more of a series of cognitive tests for you, the robot, and the other side of that I loved was when the scientist who is running all of these experiments starts answering the same questions that you, the player,
Nice.
like that becomes a whole observing the observer situation to me. Have you got any feedback on that? Because I thought that was a great way to twist it at the end.
I'm just really happy that you kind of got all that. It's really nice, and it's like reward. I know that sounds like we're geniuses that no one understands. It's not the case, but like it's really nice when people kind of see what you were trying to do, and only you and other people who played it know if we achieved those goals. But that's what we were setting out to do, something that felt interesting, that wasn't kind of like play the boss and you win. It was this kind of like, well, let's finish with, let's give people some sort of resolution, whether it's bleak or confusing or whatever, but then also ask some questions so you don't just go away and you can forget about it. Do you know what I mean? I think that feels really uninteresting to me as a writer and whatever it is I do. Like, you don't want to just kind of go, right, what are the things that we've asked here? Right, let's answer every one of those so people get to go away and sleep tight again.
Makes sense.
And that kind of, I mean, could really get into this, because I'm so proud of what we did with Static, and I wish more people had played it. But yeah, you still hold out hope that maybe in 100 years, a million more people will go, wow, how did we not play this before? But yeah, I don't know. It's sort of like, yeah, that idea of the scientist kind of being as trapped as everyone else has been. I think it just felt kind of. I don't even know what I completely think about why we did that, and I think. I don't know. I find that interesting as well. Like it was one of those. Like right, okay. So he's talking to, and I was writing it, and I'm going, hang on, I'm going to have him answer yes and no here because that feels interesting and cool. And you know, it wasn't this big like we'd drawn a big thing on the whiteboard like in The Wire, and we you know we've pre-decided how we're going to do it because again that feels really contrived, and you're not going with where your gut takes you. And I think there's a lot to be said for that. You're kind of going, where does this naturally take us? And at that point, it naturally took us to the scientist not being in control.
Well, and it was fantastic because he starts answering those questions right after he responds to the person on the phone. He goes, yeah, they kept answering yes or no like it actually had a point regardless. Oh, yeah, I can answer. Like, he doesn't even question the fact that he's doing the same thing he just was condescending about.
Do you know, we were actually talking about that this morning, and I mean, it sounds weird. Again, it sounds weird to say that there's like different interpretations of something we've done within the studio, but that is again, it's because we haven't set out this A to Z. These are the only things we have. These are the only things we think, and here's the thing we're going to do with all of those things. It's like right. We think this puzzle's really cool, so we're going to do it. So you do it, and gameplay wise, it's ace. You don't fully know why you're doing it on a deeper level, but I feel like I've got a different take on like on the remote control car level.
Right.
I've got a totally different take on why Daniel and Björn came up with that puzzle, but they just did it because they thought it was really interesting. It was like a really nice gameplay thing, but I'm like that. Yeah, man, but there's too many layers of meta there, and so I take what they've done, and then I kind of just start kind of working around that, and then they do the same thing, and it's this. So everyone's got a different reason why they've done stuff and a different take on what it means and everything. So then when we were talking about it just this morning, we were like, oh, is that why you think we did that? No. I guess so. It's for me. It's still kind of an interesting game. In that respect, it's not something that we've totally decided upon.
Well, and that's one of the things I really like about both in Static and if you're comfortable with us transitioning on to Little Nightmares at this point.
I only want to talk about Static.
Hour long Static, only Static.
Yes.
Your approach to this Death of the Author, wow. That's pretty fantastic. Your Death of the Author approach, keeping everything ambiguous so the person playing it can interpret it however they like. I see that that's resonated with a lot of people, both online and back when Little Nightmares was releasing, you saw a lot of different representations of the stuff you guys were putting out there. But before we get into Little Nightmares specifically, I'd like to talk about how Little Nightmares relates to City of Metronome that you guys pitched over a decade ago. So City of Metronome seemed to be a more bigger scale of what Little Nightmares eventually became. Would you say that's an accurate representation?
Yeah, I mean, it was bigger than, and they won't mind me saying this because they say it all the time themselves, but it was way bigger than the company could handle at the time. I think they were like 10 people, and they had there were students, and it was a student project. They made this prototype, and then they were like that. All right, this is really cool, and then much to their chagrin, lots of other people thought it was cool when they went to E3, and then it was like, we can't make this though, can we? I mean, because you would need to be bigger than we are even now, and this is like what 14, 15 years later. It had huge ambition, and I think to realize that. Even now, and people still ask us about making City of Metronome now, I think it would be something of a poisoned chalice if we did make it, because I think everyone has these ideas of what that game would have been and what it could be, even within the studio. And I think if we set out to make it, you're just asking to get a hide in, particularly in these days of Twitter. Everyone, why have you done this? I hate you.
It can't possibly be what I want it to be.
Yeah, exactly. Lol. I don't know. I'm not up with how kids talk. But yeah, so I think it's certainly bigger than what Little Nightmares became. But what I think carried over, to answer the question you've not asked yet, is just that aesthetic. I think, I mean, like the art director back then is the art director now, and this interest in making weird stories with these kind of characters and blah 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 blah. So it's just the DNA. The reason I came to the studio and the reason loads of other people came to the studio was to make those kind of games. I saw what Metronome could have been, and I was super excited by it. So we talked about that for years, and that's how myself and a few others got onto the whole idea of Hunger, which became Little Nightmares.
Right. Well, on that note, I'd like to transition more specifically to Little Nightmares. I kind of got the vibe, both with the pitch of City of Metronome and what Hunger Little Nightmares became, was that you decided to kind of piece out City of Metronome into different chunks of the world that you could show the player. And with Little Nightmares, you chose to show them the mall first, which immediately comes out the gate swinging. In the general approach I'm going to take here is because there have been so many things I've read breaking down the imagery of just by chapter to chapter. So I'd like to talk about some of those more specifically. So in the beginning of the game, you start out with absolutely zero idea of why you're there. You wake up in a suitcase in the middle of this prison area, and you don't know why you're there. You don't hear anything. And one of the first things you see is somebody hanging a little too high to see why they're hanging. That's a striking image. And something that I was curious about, and I know we talked previously to this, so you might not have the insight on this one. I was curious after I read the comics, because the comics introduced a character called the Hanged Man, and early in the game you meet somebody who's hanged. So
Did they introduce the Hanged Man?
In the comic,
there was the Mirror Man. Was that?
Well, that's who I thought was the Hanged Man. Was the Mirror Man.
Okay. No. No.
Interesting.
Mirror Man is someone completely else.
So, and that was another thing I thought that was fascinating when I was reading all these interviews with you and your company, was you guys worked out so many of these details about the specifics, but you didn't, as you said with Static, you didn't want to hold the player's hand. You didn't want to say, oh, this guy is supposed to be the one, this is the ferryman. You never mentioned the ferryman in the game, but in the comic he's huge. So you don't know how Six got there, the protagonist. You don't know if there's significance behind the fact she's wearing a raincoat. There's so many questions you have just at the beginning of the game. And did you find that people were having the reaction you were anticipating to that first chapter, where it's a lot of subtle buildup in that first chapter?
You mean the first chapter of the game, or in the comics you're talking about now?
Of the game.
We didn't expect any of the reaction that we got to Little Nightmares.
Really?
If I'm honest, no. No, you got to remember. I mean, this was just a bunch of us having a smoke at one point, just going, oh, do you know, it'd be dead cool if we made this kind of game. And then it turns out Pella and our other concept artists had drawn some really cool stuff. And we're like, hey, do you know what? That'd be really cool if we did. It was just something that kind of snowballed. And then we heard that, and there's some money available from Nordic Game that we could maybe make a demo with. Let's apply for that. Oh, shit, we won. Oh, hang on, let's apply for more money. Oh, shit, we got money from them as well. Now we need to make something. So it was all just this kind of, let's just keep going and see. So when we released the teaser, the Hunger teaser.
Yes.
And everyone was bricking it now, as we say in the north. And that reaction we weren't expecting. We thought it'd be like 5 people saw it. So ever since we kind of came up with the idea and now it's come out, the amount of time people have put into understanding what we've done and playing it, and you're seeing cosplayers. You're like, you can't prepare for that. You don't, unless you're an asshole, and you're just arrogant, and you think, yeah, well, of course people will love our stuff because it's awesome. But nobody here is like that. So no, we would just sort of like, these characters look cool. Let's give them this story. This gameplay's cool. Let's do this. Oh, people like it. Oh God. So it's almost like this panic and the kind of disbelief that that people really like. It's super lovely as well. We're not being fake humble, but it's just it's amazing. But what was your question again? Were we prepared?
Well, it was.
I wasn't prepared to answer that question.
It was the reaction you got, and I think that was a very honest answer from you because, this was. I know your studio had been working previously helping with Little Big Planet, but Little Nightmares was really your big first foray. Yeah. So what prompted this was I saw some pictures of people dressed up as Six, or there was a whole diorama with the chefs, and it was stunning how much they tried to recreate that distinct look that still gives me anxiety when I see some of these levels.
That's good. Yeah, I mean, that was another amazing thing. Like when we went to, I think it was Gamescom, wasn't it? Like, and Bandai had made the stand where people could actually play it for the first time. And then, there's Six climbing around and the chefs, throwing sweets at people, terrifying kids, sort of like that. Wow, whoa, no, this is just weird. So, that's amazing. But, yeah.
So that was, since you mentioned the Six, and there seem to be a lot of similarities between some of the imagery of this game and some classic cinema, for example. So a lot of the world has muted colors, but you have your one brightly colored character, and then I believe it's in the second level you pass through an area that's full of shoes that looks like it's directly pulled from some World War II imagery. Now, was that intentional on your part? It seems like it would have been an intentional parallel, but I wasn't sure.
No, I wouldn't say it was something we set out to do. I mean, but you look at it and you're like that. Yeah, I mean, people are just going to think we're lying if we say, I mean, of course you know about this stuff, but I mean, World War II isn't the only time absolutely atrocious things have happened. And so, I mean, you're surrounded by those images. And it was a very powerful image, and we wouldn't want to cheapen what people have seen from like the Holocaust and World War II by saying, we took that and put it in our game because we wanted people to be scared, because it would be obscene. But no, it's still about asking those uncomfortable questions, I think, really, that don't really come with answers. That like you are, where have these shoes come from? And if you notice, a lot of people said that they were like children's shoes, so they're eating children and all this, but they were all way bigger. So to me, it had taken the discussion in a different direction. And here I would say is where it comes to interpretation again. And I as the writer of Tarsier, I shouldn't be saying that my interpretation is this. But the way we kind of work is, sometimes, well, a lot of the time, in fact, the art department will come with something that they think is very strong. And then I work backwards, if you know what I mean. So like we have this world and lore that I've created, and then they come with you something that you cannot deny. You can't get away from how powerful it is and how interesting it could be. So you start working it in. It's that you don't, if it's a case of crowbarring it in, you just say that doesn't work and you try another way. But I find it really, really exciting to go, right, how can this make the lore of this world better and stronger? And it takes me in different directions and stuff. And so when I saw like the shoe pit that first time, like that, okay. So I don't want to ruin it for people, but for me, there's a very specific place that those shoes have come from. Does that feel like I'm being very annoyingly coy with the answer?
Not annoyingly. It ties back into what we said earlier, where you don't want to put directly what your intention was, because then that narrows your player's potential view. And I have to agree with you when a lot of people said, oh, those have to be children's shoes, they're only eating children. Well, that doesn't, like you said, the shoes are all the size of the children we've seen. All the children are minuscule compared to what we presume to be adults, because I assume that's what children grow up to, because we don't really see anything else. But later in the game, when you're introduced to the guests, they say the guests come onto the mall, but they never leave the mall. So something happens to them.
Yes, it does.
And that's you guys really nailed the ideas behind some of this. But you were going to say something?
Yeah, I'm just wondering whether I should, because I don't want to ruin things, but like the way the lore of the world of Little Nightmares works is has a very particular logic to it. So there's a reason that you see all of these things, and while it's not a dream, I think we said that in the past, so I can say that it's somewhere between dream and reality, and that sounds very Garth Marenghi's Dark Place. If you've seen that, it's fantastic. But so do you know what I mean? There's this kind of something of a dream logic to it, that there's maybe some things that feel like they're just there. Like when you're having a nightmare or something, you just walk through a door and you're somewhere else, and it makes sense, but it doesn't. When you wake up, it doesn't make sense. So there's just these very, very ugly things in that world which won't be denied. I think, and I think I'll stop there.
Okay. You'd said in a previous conversation that, or I believe this was said in the game, that Little Nightmares is a world that is not hospitable for for children, because it wasn't a world that was made for them, which ties a lot into what you were saying about the dream logic nightmares. This is a place they didn't expect to be, and tying it into a comic for just a brief moment. The children are kind of convinced to want to come to the mall, but they're convinced so in their darkest situation. And there was some 3D modeling for the ferryman from the comic I saw it somewhere. I don't know if that was created for the game or if that was created by a fan. But I'm curious what narrative you guys cut out for the purpose of being more letting the player decide what the specifics were, because the Mirror Man, that had to tie in some regard because of the way the game ends. But if you didn't read the comic, you wouldn't know that Mirror Man had anything to do with it. You just knew she was afraid of mirrors, the final boss. So I'm kind of going all over the place just because I have looked into this a fair bit.
I can tell. It's cool.
I am just so fascinated by how all this ties together, and that's why I'm hoping that Little Nightmares was just the first snapshot of the wider world of Little Nightmares that you guys are hoping to work on. Because if the mall was the most hospitable place you guys could think to show, how much worse is it everywhere else?
That's the question, isn't it? Yeah, I mean, like I say, I mean, when we were creating Little Nightmares, a large part of my job, you see, because, I mean, as you know, there's no dialogue in it.
Right.
Which sucks for me, because I love writing dialogue. So I probably overwrote static. But, so a huge part of my job was creating the world. In fact, it was probably my only job, other than like talking to Pella and other people, you know. When we're kind of getting started, it was kind of, right, I need to create a world that all this fits in. But, you know, where have these monstrous characters come from? Where's our main character come from? Why is the more? What is the more? What does it represent? Blah, 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 all these things. So it's all there. it's not that it's not the Little Nightmares as a stepping stone. We made that game, and if we ever got to make another one, that world is there. But as it is, it's what it is. And I would love to sit in a room with everyone and just read all 150 pages of lore that I've written, because no one else will hear it otherwise. But yeah, so I mean, there is a logic behind the world of Little Nightmares and everything that you have seen in it, and sometimes that's come from me, and it's gone straight to, like I say, to the art team and the designers and stuff, and sometimes it's gone the other way around, and it's the only way it should ever be, because you're not the only one that has good ideas, and if you think that, then you're wrong. So it's sort of like, yeah, I think, yeah, she should be in a yellow coat. All right, why? I will figure that bit out.
Okay.
Do you know what I mean? The reason for putting her in a yellow coat was great visual language, because we knew we wanted, and I probably said this in other interviews, so sorry if I'm repeating myself, but like, it's this visual language of saying she doesn't belong there. It's like you said before, like the muted colors of this world and these people, and then you got this contrast of this kid in a bright yellow raincoat. You just know she doesn't fit. So that's that out the way. People get that. We don't need to have this long soliloquy of like, sometimes I just don't feel I belong in this world, blah, blah, blah. We get that out the way, and it's very kind of reserved and just as it should be. But then you go, all right, I want to tell the story of that raincoat now. And so it's something interesting for you to do. And it's so much more interesting to work within a frame, I think, than to just kind of start from the beginning and think you can write your opus. Sometimes it needs to go the other way. Here's a restriction. You make it work.
Well, and I feel like, and I don't know how directly you were involved with this facet of it, but it did feel like in order to communicate this without holding the hand, in some places, like near the end of the game, in the ladies' quarters, you got a lot of seemingly background information. There was a picture, and I'm positive you've seen this online because it's a popular theory. It shows what looks like the lady with a small child dressed in yellow. Well, what other characters do we know that are dressed in yellow? Now, they're not saying anything here, but they are showing you something that sure seems to imply, but you never say it. So again, it is left up to the player to determine if this is actually saying such a significant connection between the lady and Six. I mean, there's a question in and of itself. Why is she named Six? What happened to the first five? So.
Yeah, I mean, I'm obviously not going to give that away, but I mean, at the same time, if you think in terms of like, if you have a dream or a nightmare or whatever, maybe there's a character in there pulled directly from your real life, but maybe there's a character in there who just has one element of something from your real life, and that's colored how they look there. So yeah, maybe you see a picture of a kid in a yellow dress or coat or whatever. You still don't know how that fits in the logic of this place. It could be very, very literal, or it could be something just influenced by, and I think that's what I find really interesting. I love to mention him, but I hate people thinking that we put ourselves next to him, but like David Lynch does that extremely well. We're not putting ourselves next to him at all.
I mean, it's a comparison. I understand.
No, if there's anyone I find inspiring in that way, that guy is just an artist in so many ways. But yeah, he kind of gets that dream logic right without it being kind of, Wayne's World crap. You just feel like you are lost somewhere, and it's the closest I've felt to someone putting a dream or a nightmare on the screen. So,
and it's explained in a way that you feel you can relate to, because it doesn't try to be too direct with the ideas behind it, but at the same time it leaves a lot up to your interpretation. Now,
yeah. And there's someone who goes with their gut for sure, and that's what I think I find really, really inspiring about his stuff. Is he's going like, I don't know why I'm doing something all the time. I just do it because it feels like the thing to do. And I think there's a lot a lot to be taken from stuff like that, instead of feeling like you have to put it all up on a spreadsheet and then put it in, because it can't help but feel sterile and contrived. Then sometimes things just feel like the right thing to do, and then you figure out why maybe in several years' time.
Mm-hmm. It's a gradual process, you know.
Mm. And as far as people's theories go, nothing I'm saying should kind of ruin that for them. I mean, because yeah, I know what I've done and what I think and stuff, but then like I say, there's other people have got different reasons for stuff, and I think it's really cool that people are kind of out there picking. So maybe some person got one thing right, but then someone else got something else right, and I say right, but you know, they're close to our own kind of take on things. But yeah.
So that was one thing you mentioned. You had these theoretical 150 pages of the Little Nightmares lore you've created. One thing I had a friend of mine ask was the Maw. Have we seen everything there is to the Maw? Because the Maw in and of itself is a fantastical creation. It goes down for a year at a time, and then it comes back up. It almost seems like it comes back up when it's ready to feed again. And then you have all these monstrous people come on. Have we seen everything inside the Maw in Little Nightmares, or was there more to it that we weren't aware of?
Yeah, no, you haven't seen everything. I mean, it would be tiny otherwise. Maybe we just got the scale wrong. Yeah, no, I mean, yeah, no, you've not seen everything of it.
Okay.
I don't know if there's anything more that you would want to see, but yeah, there's it's huge.
Given both how it operates and the ideas behind it, I would be fascinated to see exactly how it moves, so to speak. There has to be an engine room, a heart of some kind. And whether that's literal and it's just a giant engine, or it's metaphorical. And this is just a pure theory. That's where you throw all the guests that don't get turned into next year's food. I'm curious because there's got to be some logic behind it, but it's left so much up to us at this point that I am incredibly curious about more of the inner workings, because you give so many small trappings that everybody that I've talked to has just latched on to them and said, well, I think this is why it happens, or I think this is why it happens. So there's so much of this world that could be expanded on, but there's so much of the Maw itself that could still be expanded on.
Yeah, it's quite a nice luxury to have, I guess, isn't it? I like the idea that you were saying that it kind of comes up to feed, because like the idea of parasitism was definitely something that was in our mind as we were kind of creating that game, you know, and you'll see a lot of that very literally in the case of like the leeches, but you know, just this a lot of these, that sense of things just kind of feeding on itself, or just this very kind of tightly packed food circle.
Yes.
And like, yeah, like it's all contained within this thing that kind of looks like a huge parasite in itself, you know. And then you see this. I still love this image of like the guests kind of just walking up that gangplank willingly into the mouth of this thing, which is called the maw. you know, and it's just that kind of knowledge of what you're heading into and still doing it. I find really kind of interesting in my work.
And it was a striking image, the lady watching all of these people coming into the Maw, and it raised questions. What is the lady's connection to the Maw? And you were talking about...
Yeah, go on, carry on.
Oh, no. Go
ahead. You first, man, you first.
You mentioned the tight food circles, so in this case, you have the children that are theoretically brought in by the ferrymen, and then some of them, this is not a spoiler to people who have played the game, some of them end up in cages, some of them, as we saw in the DLC, become gnomes, and then the gnomes, depending on who they interact with, don't always have the best outcome. And then the guests are looking to eat anything, and then the guests never leave, so who knows what happens to them. And then you have these guest-looking chefs who it looks like they're wearing masks, but I never quite got if that was what was going. Like there was so much going on there that
So I just want to ask you lots of questions now, but like,
oh yeah, go crazy.
So do you think the guests are wearing masks then? Was that your take?
So the guests themselves.
I mean, sorry, not the guests, the chefs.
So the chefs, the only reason that I thought the chefs were wearing masks, in addition to occasionally it would seem like they would reach up under their face to scratch something. But
yeah, they did, yeah.
Yeah. So there were pictures later in the game, again in the ladies' quarters, where it looked like the two brothers who were standing next to each other, but they didn't look the same. So that could have either been a physical difference over time, or they could have put on a mask, say when they came to the maw, that could have been either to hide what they were doing from themselves, that could have been either to change their appearance. There's so many things it could have been. So do I think they were wearing masks? In the context of the game, I do. Only because they're so floppy and droopy, and you can almost see their eyes are in different locations than their sockets. It seems like a mask. But why would they wear a mask? So
say like in the Texas Chainsaw Massacre.
Oh no.
yeah, but I mean, like, would that be a mask if that had been his own face then?
Oh.
The philosophical questions of the Texas Chainsaw Massacre Part 1.
I'm about to say, this is what Toby Hooper was intending all along. I would only say it would be a mask if you... Now, this is the literal interpretation. It's only a mask if you can take it off, but it's not a mask if it's who you are, if we're getting more philosophical about it. So if they identify solely with the thing that they're wearing, if even when they take it off, that's not who they identify as, then it's not really a mask because that's their identity. So when they came onto the maw, did they put on this mask to define themselves as who they are while they are creating whatever their food is?
So, cool. No, I find the chefs really interesting, and yeah, they've got a really interesting story themselves.
You're killing me.
Oh no, sorry.
That's fine. I know it's part of your delivery. I'm not going to hold that against you. It's just you don't see much of it anymore. And that's what really gets me is this kind of delivery where you leave it up to the player to decide what exactly it is. Now, like you said, you have dozens of pages about, I'm guessing, where the chefs came from, what the janitor's backstory is, what the lady's backstory is, the ferryman, the mirror man, all these things. I'm sure you have in some regard. And I would love to know the right answer, but that also kind of takes away from it, doesn't it?
Yeah, because it does, doesn't it? Yeah.
I don't get to assign the value. Like in the DLC, for example, we see the lady, through the entire game, the lady wears this mask. But we never know why she wears it. Is she wearing it just to cover up her ugliness? Is she wearing it because she has some kind of disfiguring scar? And then in the DLC, this is the closest we get to a quote-unquote actual answer, is we see her in the mirror, and she's just as gross as everybody else. So is that why the chefs are theoretically wearing masks? Is that because they're trying... If their masks are covering up how gross they think they are, what do they look like under there?
Yeah, I love that scene with the lady at the end, though. I think, I was really excited that we were able to kind of get, like you say, some sort of answery type thing in there out of something I'd worked on, just to give people just a taste of what might be going on. And I think it's a real balance, though, because you don't want to annoy people. You don't want to seem like you're just holding back to go, let's see all of your theory videos or whatever. But we genuinely find it more interesting to create a game where you don't tell people everything, or just that, you don't get that in real life. You don't kind of just get people sort of saying, here is the reason for this. Here is the story of this. You walk into a room and you don't know nothing about it. And if you're lucky, maybe if it's interesting, you might find something about it. But it's up to you, isn't it? But like for some reason in movies and TV and games, we just expect to be told everything that we want to know. And I find that really kind of dull. So I think, and it's really kind of fun for us to create games where we know what's going on, and it's just about putting stuff in there to intrigue, to kind of make it interesting enough without making it a book that you can just close and go, yeah, I'm done with that. I don't need any more. I'm done. It's finished. They answered every single question that they asked. So there's nothing left for me to do. And you just have this barrier between yourself and the work. And I think it's so much more interesting. And what we've seen, which we weren't expecting at all, is the degree of how much people want to meet you in the middle there, like going, all right, you have asked me to, like, to communicate with this world and to think about it, to engage with it. We'll do that then. So people want that, don't they? People want to engage with stuff, but you don't get it.
I mean, that's a huge motivating factor to why I'm talking to you right here and now, because there was so much about this I wanted to engage with. I wanted to hear your thought process and why you were building it up this way. And I understand, like you said, there's plenty you're not going to be able to tell me, both for keeping the mystique and because, it's your thing. That's how it works.
And we don't know the answers.
Well, possibly that too. You're keeping it very under wraps, though. I respect that. So there was one thing. What do you find that people ask the most about when they try to engage with you? Because from my personal perspective, out of everything in that game, between the janitor, I am curious why he doesn't have eyes. Between the chefs, I am curious what their personal story is. But it's the lady out of all of those I'm most curious about, because in the DLC, we saw that a lot of gnomes can be children. So at the end of the DLC, when your player character gets turned into a gnome, did all the gnomes wrong the lady in some case? Why does the lady have these powers? What is her connection to the maw? So many questions.
I'm so desperate to answer. Turn off the recording, quick. Yeah. When we get asked all sorts, and what I find interesting is that, like, the same people that kind of have really engaged with this stuff, they're asking questions that I know they don't want the answers to them. Do you know what I mean? It's sort of like, where does Six come from? Who's the janitor? Why is he blind? What about the? And if I just said, right, it's this, like, you mother, you know what I mean? You've ruined it. You've ruined it for me because you told me the answer. Like they did. Didn't he do that with the Donnie Darko director's cut? I've never watched it because I don't want things to be clear. I loved that movie in the beginning, and then apparently he ruined it by doing the director's cut. But I refuse to even. It's like watching the Star Wars special editions.
Oh. So, what? You've created such a ambitious world. How many of these things did you hand off to? You'd mentioned that the comics were not a Tarsier thing. However, whenever I've been talking about the Mirror Man or the Ferryman, these are things that are resonating with you. Did you take some of these narrative elements and give them to the people who made the comics and give them a rough idea, or?
Yeah, I mean, I was in touch with them, and and the lore existed, so they knew where these characters fitted into our world and their general role and stuff, and they went off and did their own thing with them, So it's not like some weird spin-off that has nothing to do with what we've done. It all fits. So yeah, the Ferryman is the Ferryman in there, and the Mirror Man is the Mirror Man and stuff. And whether I don't know. I mean, I don't know. I honestly don't know what's happening in the future as far as Little Nightmares goes. So I mean, yeah, what you see in the comics is what you have on those characters, really. But yeah, like I say, that there's something to be done with everything that we've done, or all of the lore is there, like I say. So, I'm still trying to remember even how much they were in the comics. Oh yeah, the Mirror Man was quite central actually, wasn't he?
He
In the
was
second
huge, and that's one of the things where I really wanted to. I was hoping you could share some degree of insight, not too much, obviously, but I feel like there has to be a connection between the Mirror Man and the lady, because every single mirror in the lady's residence is broken, and what she is affected by is the hand mirror that is unbroken. So I'm not saying that the Mirror Man has an antagonistic relationship with the lady, but at no point prior to this did you get an indication of why mirrors were so significantly antithetical to the lady. But somehow, and I can see it on your face, like you know. So it's one of those things where as you're going through, you're seeing all the mirrors be broken, and there is only one unbroken mirror locked away, and it's crucial to this final fight with her. And in the post credits for the DLC, you see something come on the television, and it kind of looks familiar if you read the comics, but it has me and many other people chomping at the bit. No way. Like you said, we don't want to know all the answers because we want to put them together. And it's this kind of pondering that really contributes to questions and conversation and things we want to know.
Yeah. And we'd love to give it to you as well. I mean, there's no question. It's which I mean, and I think that's how everyone works really. Certainly in these times, you have to plan. You have to have something bigger than what you've presented, because there's every chance that this is the only thing we'll ever do, Little Nightmares wise. So I saw your bottom lip there. Don't look sad. No, but I mean, if that's the case, we did the absolute best that we possibly could do, and it's this distillation of all of these things in that world that we've created, and that's absolutely fine. So it's not like, rather than kind of get, all right, you don't agree, but that's not fine.
I can't help but be I know, like you said, if this is what you guys are happy with creating, this Little Nightmares being a representation, a snapshot of the world as a whole, what it is, what it contains, that is your prerogative as developers. I'm not going to say you're wrong, because it's your thing.
But you're wrong.
But at the same time, I'm like, I want more so much.
But that's cool, isn't it? That's cool. Yes. I wanted more. I'm going to get back onto it. I wanted more Star Wars. For 25 years, I waited for those prequels, and then they arrived, and then I unwished it. So I mean, yeah, there's stuff there still to be told and stuff, but all we could do when we made that game is, if this is how we attacked Static as well. If this is the last game we ever get to make, let's make it a belter. And so Little Nightmares and the DLC was just pouring everything into it and going like, right, what fits perfectly here? What can we give people that we'll stand behind going, yeah, this is what we're all about here. These are the kind of games we like to make. And they're very different, but they're also very similar, both of those games. Yeah, I mean, you're the kind of person, I think, who thinks about the games you're playing. And so, there's a lot of similarities there. So, maybe the next thing we do will be something completely else again. And then you'll be like, we want more of that as well. Just give us more of all of it.
If every single game you put out has people saying, we want more of that game, I feel like you're doing something right.
Yeah, I'll be all right with that, yeah. I want to make more Static, you see, as well, because we were a small team on that game, but we were, like I say, we were so proud of what came out. And, all right, it was our first and only self-published game, and it was a niche genre, on a niche platform from a niche studio. So it's all this kind of like, things working against it. So it's nowhere near as big as Little Nightmares became, but we're as proud of it. So it would be lovely. It would be lovely to do more with that. Or maybe it's just really, really rewarding to go, what's the new thing though? What else can we do? So who knows? We just don't know. Maybe you'll get everything you want, or maybe you won't. I literally don't know. But yeah, we're always thinking of stuff, and that's the best thing about working here, is that there's always someone going, hey, guess what I thought of last night. And that's the juice when you come into work here. It's just there's someone who is more exciting than you generally. Not you, I mean me.
Well, I mean, it's that kind of motivation that keeps you going, right?
Totally.
And if I knew everything that I was going to get, why would I be excited for it? Because then you wouldn't be surprised.
Yeah.
So if the next thing you guys put out is set in the world of Little Nightmares, I wasn't expecting it. That'd be delightful. If you guys set out to expand on the world of Static some more, wasn't expecting that. That'll be very interesting as well. If you guys come up with something entirely new, you're 2 for 2 in my book right now. So
so we can only fail. That's how
the bar is here. So.
Yeah, I know. It's kind of shit, that, isn't it? It is stressful though. Like when, particularly with Little Nightmares, like we didn't expect it to do well, or to have this partnership with Bandai. Like for them to come in and just kind of go, yeah, well, we're really into what you're doing. Let's help you make it. So now we're like that. Right. We started out quite well. So yeah, the pessimist in you just goes, we can literally only fail now, but hopefully we can keep improving on how we've started out. And not forgetting the stuff with Little Big Planet and all that as well. I mean, because that was a huge part of how we got here. So.
So one thing you mentioned about how all of this was coming together in a way that was it felt like a good payoff for you. Did you feel, and this is jumping way around on this one, one of the most traumatic things in Little Nightmares for me was the way the DLC ended, but it was kind of the only way it could end. Do you get much feedback on the fact that you spent the entire game building up Six's hunger, and then you spend the entire DLC trying to talk about this semi-success story with the runaway, and then they just kind of come together and I'm going to go with horrific, because when it ended, I felt like just thinking about it makes my heart hurt right now.
It's parasitism, I told you.
That's the thing. You kept it so tight, because the moment that you wake up at the end of the DLC, because the lady catches you, and then there's nothing else on screen afterwards. So there can only be one person you are, and that's the gnome. And because of the thematic approach you guys have taken, you know what gnome that is. So as you're proceeding down, you go, oh, this area looks familiar. And then you get into the
sausage! Not the sausage!
You see the sausage. You're like, no. And it zooms
it's got to
out.
Be like the most dramatic sausage in history. I can't think of another one. Can you?
I cannot think of a single more dramatic sausage than that sausage.
Can we end on that quote?
Put that on the box art.
The special box edition.
I
can't think of a more dramatic sausage.
Oh.
Yeah, I can't think of a more dramatic sausage. Maybe something in delicatessen.
Oh.
Maybe. But no, it's kind of cute, isn't it? But bleak. To answer the question, there was a lot of people were quite upset in the nicest way when with Little Nightmares fans, they get upset, but they're like, but thank you, or whatever, this kind of very masochistic reaction to it. Some people I think were genuinely annoyed. There's a guy called Vincent who's done lots of theory videos on Little Nightmares, and he was very upset about that. The DLC. He's not been in touch since either, so I think we actually may have broken him. Or maybe he's just I don't know.
It was a note of closure because especially with the way Little Nightmares ended, and there were questions there. How does Six consuming? She didn't even eat all of the lady, as far as we know. I guess enormous spoilers for anybody who hasn't beaten this game. She doesn't. She just seems to kill the lady, and somehow that leads to her having the lady's powers. Does that mean that she is now the new person who runs the maw? Does that mean because she leaves and she kills everybody on the way out?
Does she leave?
Well, you see her at the top of the stairs, and you see all the gnomes that you've previously positively interact with. So you don't know. She might be going to greet the new guests. Wow, I hadn't thought of that prior to now. That makes me ooh. Wow.
I told you it's the most dramatic sausage.
It's an incredibly dramatic sausage, and oh man, there's so many implications here, and it's this kind of pondering that I would imagine that you really enjoy seeing both from fans and from theorists, and just from a conversational point.
Yeah, totally. I mean, again, it can make you sound really full of yourself, but I mean I read a lot, and I that's what I love about books, is that I don't get to have that dialogue with the author. I read it, and they give me what they've given me and what they think makes a good book.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't get to kind of go, yes, but what about this? What was the symbolism of this? Like, well, okay, let me explain that completely for you then. No, I've written this, and this is what you have. So I think it's kind of it's a nice way to approach games as well. I think as long as you're still in control of what you're doing, and you have some sense of why you're doing it. Like, does it fit with the theme? Does it fit with the world? Maybe you don't need to have a full essay behind why the sausage scene, but it fits. It fits though, doesn't it? There's things that you get an energy from it, or some kind of powerful reaction to it, and then you're like, all right, hang on, let's just see how much this fits together, and if it really works, then it stays. If it doesn't, then we think again. So I think, yeah.
Well, and like you said, it fitting. That was kind of we'll go back to the dramatic progression behind needing to sate your hunger in progressively more intense ways. It was most directly referenced with the dramatic sausage scene, but it set up what was going to happen with the lady at the end fantastically, because you knew that it couldn't be just anything that would sate Six's hunger at that point. So when you are given the option at the end with the lady, even if there would have been something else there, she wouldn't have gone for it, because as the sausage scene showed, it was only growing. So you would set it up at that point to make it so this was the only outcome. Even if there had been an entire smorgasbord of food there, she would have went for that, is my belief.
Unless there was a quiche. I'm a big fan of quiche.
I'm about to say, a good quiche on a cold morning, you can't argue with that.
No, exactly. So it depends on what's on that smorgasbord.
Exactly. That would have been a much different ending. That would have
yeah.
Well, I think that's a great place to wrap this up.
The merits of quiche versus human flesh, yeah. I agree.
Well, human question mark?
So, yeah, I was going to say person flesh. Or even that doesn't work. Lady flesh. Let's go with lady flesh. That sounds a bit creepy, though.
I'm about to say, you put that on your box art.
Yeah. Let's go with lady flesh, says Merv.
Was there anything else that you would like to bring up on this?
Yeah, I mean, tons of things. You could probably tell I was dying to spill the beans and destroy the company, but, I think we can just talk again, maybe. If there's anything else that you kind of want to talk about, then we can just do it again, because it's been fun.
Fantastic. I'm glad to hear that. Thank you very, very much for your time on this. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, no, it's no probs.
All right.
Thanks for being interested in anything that we're doing.
Oh, really absolutely. Cool. No doubt. And I'm looking forward tremendously to seeing the reaction to this, because off the top of my head, I have half a dozen people who sent me questions to ask you. So
yeah, you can, like I say, just follow up with anything, and if I can answer it, I will. So if there's anything else comes of this, you know where I am.
All right. Well, thank you very much for that. You have a good day.
Hey, Sue. Cheers.
Cheers.
See ya.
Bye.
Are you a fan of Little Nightmares? Were you one of the people that played Static? Let us know what you think about your various interpretations of what you played. But until next time, this is Indie Thoughts.